Stevens, who worked as an architect from about 1880 to 1940, this is really, in my knowledge, the only of the sort of 1920s Spanish villa-style houses that he designed. To give a little bit of the history, during the architectural eclecticism of the 1920s, the quest was defined in terms of a Spanish villa, which Stevens and his son John Howard Stevens planned as a summer home for Robert Parks Hazzard Sr., a prominent Gardner, Maine shoe manufacturer. In 1926, Hazzard acquired this site on Grand Beach in Old Orchard and commissioned the Stevens firm to design the two-story, hip-roofed stucco house with green tile roof. Robert Parks Hazzard Sr. was born in Jamestown, New York in 1869. At the age of 19, he joined the Parks Hazzard Shoe Company in Jamestown, a business owned by his father and uncle. In 1895, Hazzard moved to Brockton, Massachusetts, the center of the American shoe industry, to establish the Field Hazzard Company. 7 years later, in 1902, he became superintendent of the Gardner and Skowhegan branches of the Commonwealth Shoe Company. In 1906, he founded the Snow Hazzard Shoe Company in Gardner, which became R.P. Hazzard in 1910. And this is the company that he operated until his death in 1948. To this operation in 1913, he added the Beck Shoe Company, a large chain of retail shoe stores that by the 1920s numbered 180 stores in the Northeast. That year, Hazzard was described as ranking among the foremost of industrial leaders of New England, and his career is a remarkable example of indefatigable energy and rightly directed ambition, coupled with a sincere respect for the rights of his workers. In 1928, a year after the completion of this house, Robert Hazzard's picturesque vacation home was described as an ornamental Spanish type, large and occupies a commanding view of the sea with a suitable ground area beautifully landscaped. Hazzard shared his cottage with his wife Edna, his son Robert Jr., and daughters Barbara, Catherine, and Elizabeth. Robert Hazzard Sr. was an enthusiastic supporter of aviation at Old Orchard in the 1920s and 30s. He was also responsible for building the first moto home in New England on his property in 1935, a modern-style, prefabricated, electrified, air-conditioned, and modernistically furnished home. The Lewiston Journal for September 28, 1935, commented about this addition to the property. Interesting in connection with this house to recall that Mr. Hazzard was the first man in his section to own a Victrola, that he was the first man to own an automobile, and that he was the first man in Maine to own his own airplane. And now he is the first man in Maine and New England to own the most modern house. So it's really been wonderful, A, to see the house this afternoon, but also to see the films that Dan and the Old Orchard Beach Historical Society have been sharing with us. Dan called me recently and explained the history of how these were acquired, and I think that they are really a priceless record of both this property, the Hazzard family, but also the larger issue of Old Orchard in the 1920s and 30s. And I can't wait to see reel number 2. This afternoon has really brought back memories. My father took home movies beginning in 1930, and Sunday afternoons, maybe a little bit later than this, just before dinner, it was common entertainment in our household in the 1950s, before television, to have home movies on Sunday afternoon. And so now we are repeating that tradition again. Just add one further note on a personal note, and that is that it was particularly exciting to see the footage of Harry Jones. Harry Jones was, as many of you know here, was one of the pioneer aviators in Maine. He was one of the first people to own and fly an airplane associated with Maine, going back to the 1911-1912 period. And in 1967, when Harry Jones was at the end, near the end of his life. I was a young summer reporter for the Portland Press Herald and the Evening Express, and they used to assign me the interviews for historical figures. And so I had the chance to spend an afternoon with Harry Jones, talking with him, getting information from him, and ultimately writing up an interview with him. What I think particularly impressed me was the fact that in the 20s and the 30s, he was a pioneer not only in promoting aviation here at Old Orchard Beach with his hangar and taking people up and introducing them to aviation and teaching them how to fly, but also he was responsible in that early period for designing and laying out many of the airports throughout the state, particularly in the 1930s with funds that were coming from the New Deal, from the WPA and other sources to develop airports in Maine. So it's just very wonderful to be at this very historic place this afternoon and to share this experience with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.